Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 2023 comic book film Blue Beetle. Now, there's a line of dialogue in this movie from one of the characters when they see the scarab for the first time in a burger box. I think it really does sum up this film perfectly. Well, that's a little disappointing. Like, yeah, that's this movie. It's disappointing. It's not terrible. I wouldn't even say it's one of the worst films I've seen this year, but I put it firmly in the same boat as Shazam Fury of the Gods or any other mid-tier, middle of the road comic book movie. And that is disappointing at this point in time because I'm tired of it. I'm tired of seeing middle of the road, mediocre superhero films. There's been way too many of them at this point. If this was just like the start of things, like when the MCU first started, and you got something like Iron Man 2, that would be one thing. But it's not. It's this many years and this many decades since the MCU first started, or DC first started making adaptations of their comics, and to just have another mid tier movie to add to just more mid tier films, it just makes it seem like all the money that was spent and all the time that was put into making this movie really wasn't worth it. You could have just made an animated Blue Beetle movie, and it could have been better because you wouldn't have the same limitations. And this film apparently was supposed to go straight to streaming. The plan was for it to go straight to HBO Max, and you honestly can tell. Like, this does not look like something that is a big, major theatrical movie. Like, for a film that cost this much, I think it's like, yeah, it cost 104 million. It doesn't really look like it cost over 100 million, especially when it comes to some of the effect sequences and some of the CGI, and even some of the way that the suit looks. Like, I don't think it's as bad as other people make it out to be, but it definitely doesn't look great, and it definitely does look kind of cheap for a $100 million movie. I think the Guyver 2 Dark Hero Guyver suit looks better, and that's a film that didn't even cost $1 million, if I remember correctly, let alone 100 million. Now, the film is directed by Angel Manuel Soto, and before this, he directed a Trump rally documentary. Yes, that's actually in his filmography, and a bunch of short films, a drama, and then I think another drama for like HBO Max. And he also did the Menudo documentary. This is not a guy who really established himself as a director who could pull off shooting a big budget action movie or superhero film or anything of this type. Because prior to that, he didn't shoot anything like that, and you can tell. You can tell when it comes to a lot of scenes in this movie. I would say the most consistent scenes in terms of quality are the scenes where he's trying to be dramatic, which makes sense because that's his wheelhouse. That's where he is at his most comfortable. And I understand that sometimes you can have a moment where you hire somebody and they're more well known for a certain type of film, and then they do a different movie and they pull it off, like the Russo brothers did. And they did stuff like I think Drillbit Taylor and comedies, or it wasn't Drillbit Taylor's You, Me, and Dupree. Like, they did stuff like that, and then they wound up directing Winter Soldier and knocked it out of the park. I think so. It's one of those things where it can work sometimes, but from my experience, from what I've seen, it's a rare thing. A lot of the time, when you get a director who doesn't have a ton of experience, just directed a couple of indie dramas under their belt, maybe a documentary or two, they really aren't ready for it. And I don't think he was, because there's a lot of direction in this that's just very inconsistent, unfocused. The attempts at comedy are particularly cringe and not funny. Like, they don't have any comedic timing. They are just really hard to watch. And I really do attribute that to the fact that He hadn't directed anything in terms of a comedy, unless you consider the Trump rally documentary a comedy. But other than that, no, he hadn't really directed anything that is remotely comedic. And he hadn't directed anything that was really an action film, hadn't directed anything that really had any sort of sense of spectacle to it. So when it comes to the scenes that are supposed to look visually stunning or impressive or incredible, they don't really look that way because he doesn't know how to shoot those scenes in a way to really make those visuals pop. When it comes to the action, other than maybe a couple bits like the hallway fight or a couple other moments with Blue Beetle, the action isn't really anything that consistently exciting or thrilling or even that fun to watch from a directorial standpoint. A lot of the direction is just very stock standard, play it safe, not really taking a lot of chances with the angles and so on, except for when it comes to a few moments with Blue Beetle. I'll give him that. There are a couple moments where Blue Beetle is flying around the city, or there's a couple moments in the climax with some of the fights where the direction was a little more risky and adventurous and had a sense of fun to it. But a lot of the time, it's very held back. It's very restrained, and I think a lot of that is because of the fact that he's just inexperienced. He just doesn't really necessarily have that experience yet, so he's just learning it on the fly, similar to Blue Beetle himself, where he's just learning how to be a hero on the fly. It's the same thing with the direction. The script by Gareth Dunnett, Alcocer. I think that's how I probably butchered it. Like, I'm just saying Gareth. So the script by Gareth, it's also one of those things where it's just unfocused. It's just very inconsistent in terms of its quality, much like the direction. There were times where the script is not too bad. There's a couple one-liners, a couple moments where Blue Beetle is being funny that I didn't mind. Kind of reminded me a little bit of Spider-Man or some of those other wisecracking teen superheroes. Um, there are some moments where I think it does have some effective drama, like between Jaime and his father, or some of the stuff involving him and just embracing and just deciding to accept his fate as the Blue Beetle. Um, the stuff involving Ted Cord, the previous Blue Beetle, I think that was written fairly well, especially his lair and his tech and all that other stuff. I think the film had a surprising amount of edge to it at times, like when Jaime first turned into the Blue Beetle. It was actually a really genuinely kind of horrifying scene, almost like a body horror sequence. Um, and I feel that, there's a few other moments here and there where the script shines a little when it comes to the creativity. The action, I don't think there's nearly enough of it, but when Blue Beetle is there and he's utilizing his powers to the best of his ability, I think the script does a pretty solid job showcasing the different powers and the different abilities that Blue Beetle has, and his style of fighting and so on, and his own flair. But when it comes to like building a romance between Jaime and between Jaime Reyes and the daughter of Ted Cord, Jenny Cord, I feel the script is pretty woeful. Just a ton of cliches, and nothing about that romance feels genuine or plays out in a satisfying way. The villain, the estranged sister, Victoria Cord of Ted Cord, the current head of Cord Industries, might as well be a wet noodle. Like, just a really weak ass villain. The script did a bad job making this villain intimidating and memorable in any capacity. I don't think it helped that Susan Sarandon was cast in the role, but I'll get to that later. But the writing didn't do that villain any favors because they still tried to do the sympathetic route, like, oh, well, she just wanted to be more involved in the industry and she wanted to have more power in the corporation, but because she was a woman, she was not given that chance, and now she's vindictive about it. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't lose. I mean, I don't lose my hatred for this character or my ire for this character because she's a woman in today's society and she was not given the the right opportunity to her mind because of the fact that she's willing to go as far as she is. She's willing to take this scarab, connected with the OMAC, and essentially kill tons of people, potentially millions of people, and create some kind of new world order or whatever, with her in charge. So no, I don't sympathize with her. That's the moment where I cease to sympathize with somebody is when they become a megalomaniac. That's just me. And I sympathize more with her henchmen, Omak, uh, Carapax, but only because of what they threw in at the end. And I think that was just a mistake anyway. They should have made that character more tragic and more conflicted and more of a character who has these gray areas between good and evil earlier in the movie instead of just doing this info dump at the end. I don't think that really worked because it was too late. Like, oh, the blue beetle just the scarab just conveniently unlocks his memory. And you're just like, and then you see these flashbacks from him when he was a kid and he was taken away from his parents and his parents died and Victoria was behind it all and he was abused and it was this and that and he was tortured and he was forcibly turned into this machine man hybrid. And I'm like, okay, all right, establish that stuff a lot earlier in the movie instead of doing this stuff way at the end. But that's what a good screenwriter does. And I don't think the guy who wrote this is that great of a screenwriter. Because once again, just lack of experience. Like if you just look at the projects that he's done. Because I looked at the projects that the director did. And if you look at the project that this guy did, which I'm just going to check real quick, just to refresh my memory. So if you look at his screenplays, what he's written, he wrote Miss Bala. Remember that piece of shit? Miss Bala? That's the only other film he wrote before Blue Beetle. Great. So now he's given the task to write Blue Beetle. And he's just not that experienced. So he's not that good of a writer. Didn't do that great of a job with Miss Bala. So here he is writing Blue Beetle. And you got this fun, just charismatic, just great character in Blue Beetle. And you just write a script that's just so generic and so forgettable and just average that a lot of people who see this movie, they're not even going to want to go out of their way to go read a Blue Beetle comic, which is too bad because there's some really fun comics with Blue Beetle. And yeah, just the way both the villains were written was just not that great. The stuff with Jaime's family, mixed bag. The stuff with his mom, I'm fine with. The stuff with his father, I think is good. It's grounded. His sister, though, the way that she's written, she's just obnoxious and annoying. I owe myself a luxury dump. Like, what? What the hell? And yeah, overall, she's just an annoying character. And you're supposed to, I guess, feel for her or hope that she doesn't get killed at the end of the movie when she's trapped at some point in the climax. And I really don't care. There's this other guy who works for Victoria Cord who you're supposed to kind of feel for too because Cord is being a little abusive towards him. And then he has this heroic moment where he stands up for himself but then still dies. So it's like one of those things where it's like, okay, did we even need that character? Probably not. Speaking of characters, you didn't really need the grandmother. You didn't need the grandmother and her shtick of being crazy. Didn't need that. George Lopez's character, like he's supposed to be cool, but the way that he's written, he's anything but most of the time. Batman's a fascist and he's a conspiracy theorist and he's just a different kind of annoying. The sister, the way that she's written, she's just annoying in a way where she's just smug and unlikable. George Lopez's character is written in a way where he's just annoying because he's just he's just awful. Like he's just somebody that's just always just has all these conspiracy theories, and he's supposed to like mean well, but his advice isn't necessarily the best most of the time, except for like that one scene. He's selfish. He's this and that. There's all these things about this character that just raise numerous red flags, but we're supposed to like him because it's George Lopez. I think that's really what it is, and it doesn't work for me. And another thing that doesn't work for me is just how much this script is overcompensating when it comes to providing Latin representation. I know I'm a white guy, okay? But I think that even people who are Latinx or Latino, I think a lot of them would look at this movie and be like, you gotta be fucking kidding me. So you've got Rudy, and he's driving around in a pickup that I think is also part lowrider. And when you honk the horn, it does the stereotypical Mexican horn thing, the da 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 da, or whatever the heck that is. And then he's got Cheech and Chong on the dashboard, bobbleheads of Cheech and Chong. And then he calls his truck the Taco. So I mean, I, I I just think that's a bit much. I don't know about you. And do you really have to go that far? You can have representation for Latinos and do it in a way that's not so tone deaf. Because that's incredibly tone deaf. He drives around a truck called the Taco with Cheech and Chong on the dashboard. But that's just me. And there's just a lot of stuff that's just tone deaf, like the sense of humor. I'm gonna take a luxury dump. There's a scene that is honestly at the start pretty badass, where the family, they're trying to go rescue Jaime because he got taken away by Victoria and Omac, and they get inside of Ted Cord's Beetle, uh, uh, which is like this flying, crawling sort of beetle mobile kind of thing, and it's almost like the ship that Night Owl flew in. I believe his name is Night Owl, but yeah, it's the ship that the guy flew in Watchmen. And so you've got the whole stuff with that thing, and there's this cool scene where it grows legs and it starts just stomping and just kicking all kinds of ass and just kicking Victoria's soldiers away like they're nothing to the song "Kickstart My Heart" by Motley Crue, and then it ends with a fart joke. And I'm like, where the Beetle machine just farts for an uncomfortable length of time, and it farts gas and knocks everybody out, and you're just like, like there's a lot of moments in this movie where you're like, okay, that's kind of cool, that's kind of fun. Really? What, did you really have to do that? Like, why did you have to do that? It's almost like the script was written by Urkel. It's like, did I do that? It's like, yeah, you did, and you shouldn't have done that. Just like you shouldn't have wrote this screenplay, Urkel. But yeah, it's frustrating. Maybe isn't the right word. It's disappointing. That is a really good way to sum up this film. Like the character Jaime, I think, and if I'm butchering the pronunciation of that, I apologize profusely. I've probably done it numerous times. I'm sorry. But that character, I think the character was written decently enough. I think there's definitely an arc there, and I think the character works fine, at least to me personally. He's definitely one of the better things about the movie. One of the things about the cast that I actually genuinely liked, other than his mom and his dad. But like, he's a decent enough hero, but he doesn't have a good villain to face. He doesn't have someone that feels like a really, let's just say, a good match when it comes to a foe. Like it doesn't feel like he's met his match at any point, even though they really try to do that. And I mean, Omac only defeated him because he had a big giant claw. Other than that, he probably wouldn't have been able to do it. And even when he gets super souped up by the algorithm of the scarab, he still gets his ass kicked. So like, it's one of those things where, and then he's not really a villain. He was somebody who was manipulated, so he's not even really a real villain to begin with. And it's not like Blue Beetle even defeats Victoria Cord in the first place. So it's one of those things that's like, okay, she's the one that is the real villain, and Blue Beetle isn't even the one that defeats her. And yeah, it's just disappointing in that regard. And for an action superhero film, there's not enough action in it. There's a lot of scenes where it's either trying to be horribly unfunny and just trying to showcase the culture of the Latinos, but in a way that is honestly pretty tone deaf and or just lazy. And it's not as fun as it could be. And like it starts to pick up once Jaime gets the scarab and becomes the Blue Beetle, and then it starts to pick up a little bit, but takes a while to get going at that point. And even at that point, other than like the stuff with the flying around and cutting the bus in half and some of this other stuff that you've seen in the trailer, you don't really get much action and fights until like I think like over an hour into the movie. There's only 2 hours of the end credits. So it's not like there's a whole lot of time to cram all that in there. So even though the film has this ending where it's like, oh, you know, he's got the girl and they fly off at the end of the film and everything works out and Cord is still alive. It's one of those things. It's like, do I really care? No, not really. I don't really care about seeing Blue Beetle 2. And I'm not the only one because a lot of people didn't even watch the movie, at least in theaters. So it's just one of those movies where, yeah, the script is just very inconsistent. And honestly, I said it was just as inconsistent as the direction is, but it might be even more inconsistent now that I think about it. And this isn't a rant because, yeah, there are things about it that I didn't like, but there's a lot of stuff that's just there. Like it's just okay, watchable, tolerable. Like it doesn't piss me off like The Flash. It's not consistently as obnoxious as that movie is. And there are some things that I do enjoy. Like I do like some of the fight scenes, and I do like the idea of Blue Beetle. I've always liked the idea of Blue Beetle. I just don't think the screenplay really utilized the best traits of Blue Beetle well. Didn't really showcase the best that Blue Beetle has to offer as a character or as a potential franchise. And the cast, it's also another mixed bag. Like so much about this is just a mixed bag. It's like you ordered something from the burger place and you got the wrong order, but it was edible. And it was too much of a pain to go back and get the right order, so you just ate what you had. Like it's that kind of thing. It stars Xolo Maridueña from Cobra Kai, and this pains me to say because I think he's really good in Cobra Kai. I think he's great in Cobra Kai, but in this, he's just not a leading man. He doesn't have what it takes to carry a film. And it sucks. I thought that he would have had that ability because of what I've seen in Cobra Kai. But after seeing this film, it seems like Xolo is an actor who works the best in an ensemble. He works the best when he's not the main focus of a story, when he's one of many focuses, and he's able to interact with a lot of other actors, and he's not asked to carry everything. And when he's asked to carry it, when he's asked to be the guy, he just doesn't have what it takes. He doesn't have enough charisma. He doesn't have enough personality. And he's not a good enough actor. And I hate to say that because there are some moments like when he's Blue Beetle and he's just voicing the character and he's having fun with it. And I think he does a good job. But there's moments where he's just playing Jaime. And he is just having a conversation with his sister on the roof. And it's just not believable. And the acting is not very good. It's either flat, uh, uninspired, or it's just following too much of a pattern. Like he's ending every sentence in a question. And it's just the example of an actor who just isn't quite there yet. And it's just sad. It's sad to see Xolo just flounder in this movie. Because you're like, this is a good role for him. This is a good opportunity. This is a good launching pad for him in his career. And he just doesn't go anywhere with it. He just stays grounded most of the time. You know, that scene where the Blue Beetle is just flying ground level? That's honestly kind of what's going on here. He never really takes off. And it sucks. Because I think Xolo, I think he has potential as an actor. Maybe he just needs a little bit more time. Maybe that's all that it is. Or maybe it's just a bad script. That could be it too. You also have Adriana Barraza plays his grandmother. Damián Alcázar is his father. Elpidia Carrillo, who plays his mom, who was in Predator. Um, Out of that trio, I will say Damián and Elpidia. I thought they were the best. I actually bought them as his parents. I thought they had a good rapport with one another. The Nana though just didn't work for me. I mean, it's not like it was a bad performance, but it was just very cartoonish and just I didn't think she was that funny, so I think that didn't help. Um Almost kind of gave me vibes of like the spooky grandma from Addams Family, but like nowhere near as funny. That kind of thing. Um Bruna Marquezine as Jenny Cord, terrible. I thought she was the worst actor in the entire movie. Like, just you want to talk about flat line delivery? Like, she's a poster child for that in this movie. Just so flat, so lifeless, so one note. No chemistry with Xolo at all. Didn't buy her in any scene really. Like, I thought she was just bad, just a pretty bad performance. Um, Even in a scene where she's supposed to be like showing emotion, I didn't find it believable. Raoul Max Trujillo is Omac. I thought he was somewhat intimidating. He has a good look to him. I just think the script let him down. And in all honesty, I think he was intimidating enough. And I know some people think like he's just your average henchman type, and I think in large part that's because of the way that he's written, not necessarily what the actor brings to the screen. I think if the script was better and he was given a character arc that was not just a info dump at the end, and there was little pieces here and there, and there's more complexities, I think he could have been able to pull that off. And in all honesty, I think Omac should have just been the villain. Period. You can make him be some guy who worked with Cord, and he made Cord disappear, and he took over the company, and so on. And you could have some little moments of sympathy if you want. Maybe some stuff with Cord and how Cord was trying to help him because he was disabled, but then something went wrong, and he blames Cord for that and making him into this monster. But then he decided to take everything from Cord in retaliation, and now he wants to not only take everything from Cord in terms of taking his industry and his business away from him, but he also wants to take his family away, and he wants to destroy the city, Palmyra City, which is the city that Cord protected. So I think there's something you can do with that that's a lot more effective than Cord's older sister being super Karen. And speaking of that, Susan Sarandon is pretty shitty. She's pretty shitty in this. I like Susan Sarandon. I think she's a great actress, but she's just miscast in this film. I didn't buy her at all as a villain. Didn't buy her in this role. She's about as believable as an intimidating villain or presence as Hillary Clinton at a presidential rally, when she was running for president. Like it's one of those things where I half expected Susan Sarandon to be like, and Pokemon Go to the polls. or get in your blue Beetle and drive to the polls. Like no, like it just did not. It didn't work. It didn't click to me. And I think Susan Sarandon is a great actress. She really is. But this is just not a good performance. Not a good fit. And the way that character is written, she's Mega Karen. That's about it. That's Victoria Cord. George Lopez's character, Rudy Reyes, supposed to be funny, but I didn't find him funny most of the time at all. And I just felt that the character, in a lot of ways, just represented just some of the worst stereotypes and cliches when it comes to Latino characters. And it didn't do it in a way where it was like a satire either. It was supposed to be sincere. I'm sorry, you're driving around in a pickup that goes da 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 da, whatever the hell, has Cheech and Chong on the dashboard, and you call it the taco. I'm to me that's just that is the very definition of insensitive. And it doesn't help either that I'm not really a big fan of George Lopez anyway, especially nowadays, because of all of the stuff that he's been involved with, and controversies and all this other stuff and so on. But yeah, I didn't think that character was very well written. It's like that character kind of insisted upon itself, like, I'm cool, you should like me, and I'm like, I don't like you. You need to put more of an effort in terms of writing the character, or Lopez, you need to put more of an effort into making this character likable and engaging, or someone that you want to survive or you root for, other than the fact that you're just playing the guy. In terms of the rest of the cast, you got Belissa Escobedo as Milagro, Jamie's younger sister. I'm not going to be too hard on the actress because she was just playing the role the way that she was asked to play it. And she did a good job playing an annoying character that I did not care for and did not like, and was smug and was just the type of character that I'm getting tired of seeing. Like the character that thinks their shit doesn't stink. The kind of character that would say, "Oh, I owe myself a luxury dump." Like that kind of character. But she did a good job playing that character, but doesn't mean that I like that character at all. And I don't even know if I would say it's a good performance because of how well she played that character. Because I don't think it's really that hard to play that kind of character or that kind of role. But I will give her a little bit of kudos for the scene where she showed emotion when her father was dying. I will give her that. So I think that the actress, I think from what I saw, she has a little bit more capability to maybe do more as an actress in the future than just play the eye rolling stereotype at this point in time of the character who's probably a Gen Z who just is above it all. You also have the guy who played Sanchez, the scientist who works for Victoria, whose name is actually Jose Francisco Morales Rivera de la Cruz, but he keeps being called Sanchez by Victoria because, she's a white lady and she's racist. That guy was just there. The other elements of the production were fine. The cinematography by Paweł Pogorowski. The film looked good for what it was. Had some nice looking shots. The editing was fine by Craig Alpert. Definitely at its best when it comes to an action scene. The music by Bobby Kyrillik. I didn't remember anything. I didn't remember a single note from the score, so I would say that it's mostly forgettable, but not noticeably bad. So I'll give it that. The soundtrack, I mean, it was fun to hear Kickstart My Heart, but they ruined it with a fart joke, so it just made that scene into a joke. So, oh, that's cool to hear that song, and I like that song, but it ends with a fart joke, so not that cool anymore. And then the other songs, I thought mostly sucked. It felt like this is another instance of whoever is behind this movie trying way too hard to provide as much Latino representation as possible, because almost every fucking song is a song in Spanish. it's a Latin song or an American song that has Latin lyrics and Latin vocals, and you're just like, I get what you're trying to do, but you're just doing too much to the point where it just seems like it's facetious. It seems like it isn't even like genuine. It just seems like you're faking it. Like when you're doing it this much, and this film does this way too often. That's another thing I didn't care for when it comes to this movie. It's just how many times the movie stopped and was telling you it's Latino. Hey, in case you didn't know, in case you didn't realize, Blue Beetle is Latino. It's a Latino movie. It's a Latino superhero film. It's the first ever Latino superhero film. And I'm like, come on, man. Like, you can do this in a way that's more subtle and honestly more respectful if you think about it. Because if you have to have this representation in a way where it just seems like you're just shoving things in there and you're not even giving it a second thought or really thinking things through, you're just throwing stuff into the movie, throwing in Latino references, throwing in Latino songs, throwing in Latino directors, writers, cast members, like all this other stuff. It just seems like you're just trying to get virtue points. And sadly, that's a common theme right now and a common trend when it comes to Hollywood. These movies that are trying to be the next Black Panther, that are trying to just get the next amount of virtue points for their brand and for the studio. And so they have a fallback option. So if the movie fails, like Blue Beetle did, if it doesn't do well in the theaters and it doesn't do that great critically, then they can have a shield. They'd be like, oh well, you didn't like Blue Beetle and you weren't into it because it was just too Latino for you. And I'm like, no, that's not the case at all. I wasn't a huge fan of the film because it wasn't a good movie. It wasn't well written. It wasn't well directed. And it wasn't really that well casted or that well acted consistently. And I didn't even hate the film at the end of the day. Like, I just thought it was okay. Kind of honestly how I felt about Black Panther. Like, it's there. I can watch it. But it's not what I would consider to be a favorite of mine. It's not going to make my top 10 of best films that I've seen in 2023. It's not one of the best superhero films, but it's also not one of the worst. But that's not saying much, especially in today's day and age. The bar is already so low when it comes to the genre. So it's like, I don't think it's going to take that much extra effort to be better than mid, to be better than average. But for whatever reason, a lot of these comic book films, these superhero films, they just can't do that. With Blue Beetle, they put more effort into the casting and hiring directors and writers of a certain ethnicity than they did into the actual movie. That's really what it seems like. And it's too bad. Because Blue Beetle is a story, it's a comic that has potential for a fun, entertaining, memorable movie in the comic book genre. But this film isn't it. But anyway, thank you for watching my review of Blue Beetle. And until next time, I'll see you later. See ya.